Okay, so we're moving into the stage of the patina and finishing. So one of the first things we're going to want to do is take this modeling paste and just touch up any areas that we missed when I reattached the arms. This here, it's normally used for like adding texture to two-dimensional things like painting, acrylic painting, and whatever. But you can apply it to surfaces. Some people like doing craft stuff with it. So I'm going to apply it to here, just do some final touch-up, get this prepped, and look for any other like flaws that I'm not happy with. And once that's done, I will probably do this next. Center, drill a hole, and get that ready for the screw. I won't put the screw in yet. It's actually a bolt here. So I'll put the head in first, and then the next thing that I'll do after it's drilled is apply the bronze coat, do the Tiffany green on top of it for some aging effect, and then some black shoe polish to knock it back, and then retouch it with some of the bronze B from Sculpt Nouveau. And at that point, we'll put it in the base. This is already drilled, and we'll just attach. We'll sink the screw in there. We'll set that, and then we can attach it, and then we'll felt the bottom, and we'll have a completed sculpture. So a lot of steps. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So this stuff is non-toxic, but I'm wearing the gloves because you know, it's like having glue dry to your hands. I don't know if you enjoy that. I don't. And this stuff is sandable. This is just going to help me get a little smoother texture here. And you want to be careful because whatever it sticks to, it'll, I mean, if you leave like a glop somewhere on accident, it'll dry as a glop, a really hard glop, and then you're obligated to go in there and do some sanding. Nothing wrong with that, just more work. So I will list this in the description. And this stuff helps hide seam lines a little better also. So if you're afraid maybe your seam lines didn't quite look the way you wanted, put this on there and then come back and do a little sanding. Okay, so now I have this applied. I just smeared it around with my fingers until I felt satisfied. It dries quick enough, within about 10 minutes, that you can apply more if needed. But I might go back through and do some light sanding just to knock down some of these high areas because I don't want that texture to show. But this creates a more kind of homogeneous surface, and we're that much closer to being ready to apply the bronze B. So I'm going to wait a couple hours and double check my work, do a little sanding, and there we go. The one thing that I like about this stuff, this modeling paste, is that even though I use gloves, it looks like it's streaked fingerprints. So I'm pretty happy about that. I mean, because those little things like fingerprints add to it, I think. And I'm not a perfectionist. And you know, it's funny, as we give ourselves that title, thinking that somehow we reach perfection. But I've found being a perfectionist goes hand in hand with procrastination. So I've tried to overcome my own obstacles with procrastinating by striving for excellence instead of perfection. So, I mean, there's going to be some things that are blatantly obvious, you know, that stand out, that'll really drive you crazy. But unless you're neurotic and don't wear that as a badge of honor, I think you'll be satisfied just striving for excellence, at least until you get a handle on what you're doing, and then you can go back and perfect your craft over time. But I definitely wouldn't try to be a perfectionist in the first shot, because you'll drive yourself crazy and you'll be very unproductive and not a prolific artist. Am I speaking from experience? You betcha. Okay, so that's that. So now I'm pretty satisfied. So this is going to go pretty lightning quick, I think. And man, I'm not satisfied with that. Okay, so I'm pretty satisfied with that. So I'm going to have to move pretty quickly. I'll move this out of the way since we are done with that. So the way this works is to move pretty quickly. I want to put this on here. Then I'm going to spray the Tiffany green while this is still wet, because there's live bronze in this. And once this dries, it's in a acrylic, so it's suspended. It's a bronze powder. This will dry, and then this won't have much effect on it. This is a Tiffany green patina spray that you put on either raw bronze or this stuff while it's wet, and it will begin to turn green. The longer you let it sit, the greener it gets to like a chalky lime green kind of crust. I'm not going to hose this thing because I don't want that look, although it might be nice. But what I'm going to do is just put on one coat of this and just give that a couple nice mists. So just kind of almost like a misting, or like a blanket of fog falling on it, just for a little bit of aged look. After that has its full effect, I'll be able to see if I need to put any more of this on and touch up those areas directly. And then when I'm satisfied, I can put on a Krylon crystal clear acrylic spray. Acrylic spray. That's important to note. There's a link in the description. So, and once that's done, we'll hit it with the shoe polish. So right now, here we go. Here we go. Recycle, reduce, or reuse. This is how I like to reuse my brown paper sacks. Stippling is the best instead of brush. When you brush on that first coat anyway, it's really thin and it leaves brush lines. So if you stipple like that, it tends to cover better and it doesn't lift itself up. You want to put the brush in there for the next coat. I don't know. Whatever method works for you. I think you get a better, more even coating. Yeah, and it will break your bristles. These cheap little brushes. Sometimes you'll see them in the paint. So yeah, you're not going to spray the Tiffany on here after this first coat. Sorry to not mention that. This coat is to make sure it's thoroughly coated, and it's going to dry on you. I mean, if you would get through this before it dried, that would be a miracle. And I don't recommend trying it. You know, be as thorough as you can on this first one, because you don't want to get finished and find out later you missed a spot. So, you know, get a good coating, and then when you go back through, you'll be able to cover it much more quickly because you're not dealing with every nook and cranny and all those little white spots from the plaster kind of poking through it. You can just go over that. So, like I said, just get a good first coat, then we'll go back. Sometimes it's easier to get thicker. Put your initial glop in the recessed areas, and then you can kind of pull it out as you go. So like these lines down here aren't getting quite filled because my bristles aren't loaded. So if I just put a heavy glop in there, and then I can work it out and keep referring back to it as I go over these broader surfaces. Okay, so we have this all covered now with the bronze paint. It should be drying pretty well up here. I just finished down here. I can see where it's wet. So I'm going to give it a few minutes, and at this point you can go grab a coffee or tweak some ideas on your other projects you're working on. So once that dries, I'm going to come back and slap a second coat on it, and then give it a few mists here with the Tiffany green. I'll put it on a Lazy Susan and turn it while I hit it, like, and then we'll let that sit for maybe an hour or so. Anyway, go grab you a coffee. I'll go work on some ideas, and we'll be back in a couple few. Okay, so now this is dry. I'm gonna put on my second coat, and this time I can move a lot more quickly. And then I'm going to apply some of the Tiffany green. So let's go ahead and move here. And I shook up my can. I put the lid back on here and shook it back up before I reapplied it. Because this, you know, the bronze is more dense than the acrylic. Okay, so at this point, I've got my backdrop put up. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to do a couple light mists. Okay, this stuff has a very strong vinegar smell, and you might be able to see. So, like, where I put it on a little too thick, there's a run mark, and that'll run down. If I'm lucky, it'll miss that dimple, but yeah, okay, it's going past it. That's good. But this stuff, whatever it's made of, will begin to do its work. See, there's a heavy run. I don't necessarily care for that. And I might just, here's what I'm going to do. Sometimes when I see the run marks, I know how those end up looking. They're really heavy streaks of green. And I just don't want to deal with that in my finish. So where some of this stuff is kind of more evenly modeled, I suppose, I'm gonna let that go. The stuff is still on the surface. I don't think it's even possible to wipe it off. I'm just blotting it so it has a weaker effect. And in some of these areas where you would naturally see it outside, like patinas, like kind of being more green in these recesses, I think that's perfectly acceptable. And it's going to add depth to the piece. I might just, yeah. That bottom side wasn't really coated, but I think I may have just done too much. We'll see. Not to promote bad work practices, but this patina is going to help conceal flaws also. So that could work to your advantage. It might work against you, and that if you worked really hard on a specific detail and now it's history. Anyway, you can see this stuff is green. And I will warn you that this has a spring and like a BB and so forth to help kind of regulate and to suck it up and shoot it out. So what I do, if you leave it like this, the next time you spray, you're going to have some ferric, you know, rust, iron kind of color coming out. So how I clean this up is I just remove it, and you can see it's still in the line, and I just spray it, and that should suck it right out of there for the most part. And then if you're not a purist, you can put that back in there. And I save that for next time. And then I take this over to the sink and I fill up this cup with water, and I just keep spraying until I feel like that internally is rinsed out. I'll do this cup like several times. It's just a little 3-ounce Dixie cup. So I'll spray that out several times. So about, you know, pump 9 ounces through it, and then I consider that good. And then I hang it up on the edge of the sink and let it dry. So that's how I do that. Now we're going to let this work its magic. You might be able to see some of the effects so far, like here. In these areas I'm getting some dark green, and here it's starting to lighten up. It's turning a little green. This will eventually get like a frosty kind of a frosty lime green texture and color. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes since I walked away. And you can see some of these areas, like right here where we got a really intense lime green color. And it kind of starts to turn a little yellow. So we know this area, that's about as ripe as it's going to get. And at this point, you know, we can just rub it. It's starting to flake. It's dry. And if I want, like this area right here, or right in here, or even up in here, you know, I didn't get it. I could open up the bronze B and reapply it. See that streak? I don't like that, man. Anyway, I could go in there and touch this up if I wanted to, but I think what I'm going to do is just go on to the next phase. I think this is enough to break up the monotonous of the bronze, that I got something to work with now. And like I said earlier, like, my seam lines look pretty good, but if I was having a little trouble, I would touch that up and just give that a quick mist. And right here also, where I put it together, but it looks pretty good, so I'm not worried about it. Okie dokie. So at this point, I'm just going to rattle can my crystal clear. I'm going to take it outside because I don't want my studio to reek. Okay, so if you want a demonstration of what I'm going to do outside, this is it. Swish, 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 swish. You know, on and on I go. Don't put it on too heavy. Just do maybe 1 or 2 coats on each side. Wait 5-10 minutes. Do it again. Wait 5-10 minutes. Do it again. If you want 3 coats, 2 should probably be enough. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to put it on tape. Just want to give you a heads up for those of you that need a little hand holding. This is dry now. So the crystal clear, you can see how it covered up. A lot of that, what it did was it darkened it. It's still there. And some of these other points in here are definitely still there. But what this does is changes the tonal quality. It just breaks up the monotony of the single application of the bronze, and it kind of darkens it in some places and leaves it brighter in others. And this is all good. I mean, the whole idea to making a good patina are the layers, layers and layers. You know, if we're going to make a sophisticated piece, we can't be satisfied with the red and yellow arches. We have to go to Chez Henri. As deep as I want to go with this bolt is about 3/4 inch. This is all the deeper I want to do it, because then when I have my wood base, you know, it can't be longer than that, or I'm going to have to be using a cutting wheel and kind of chop that off. So I determined that 3/4 is optimal. And so I'm going to measure the base here of my spade bit from the gullet, let's call it the gullet. And I'm going to do that at the bottom there, because that's where the bolt head's going to sit. So I can either go to this line, that's a nice reference point, or I can lay a piece of tape across the back side. And once that starts to hit and flap, I know I'm plenty deep. You see that piece hanging off? Once that starts to hit the bottom of the sculpture and knocking the dust everywhere, I'm home. Put a right angle on the sides here, you know, kind of a carpenter's square like that, and then lay a 45-degree angle on that and measure the 2 points, and then you'll have your center. I've already done a center here, so I just held it there and turned it upside down, and I have my center hole. And I just really need to get started here. So there's my hole. So this is the JB steel stick. You can use the JB water weld, which is what I used in the last video to put her arms together. But since I have some of this steel stick, I'm going to go ahead and use that. What's cool about in the art applications, you can see there it's a 2-part. So you just cut the size that you need, and there you go. But since I'm using the rest of it, that's what I got. If you use your actual hands to do this, you're going to get this gray stuff up and down your hands. And it has such a lovely smell. And this stuff should set pretty quickly, a lot faster than the other stuff. So my studio is quite cold this morning. Very cold. So if I let this set like that, that's going to get as hard as a rock. So what I'm going to do, make like a worm there. Make 2 worms. The first one, this is the key here to keep this bolt from unspinning. We want to lock this inside so it doesn't spin when we tighten the nut. So I'm going to try to make a section of that literally like so. So I'm going to set that down in there. Make sure that that's pretty square. What's important to note here is that this has to be flush. So I'm going to have my straight edge here, which is a fettling knife. And it's okay if you get some of this stuff in the threads at the bottom, because your wood base is going to occupy some of these bottom threads. But you definitely want to make sure that you don't have any of this stuff in the threads up here. Make sure that that's pretty centered. Make sure it's standing where you want it to stand. I'm just going to put the nut on there to clean off the threads to make sure. Yeah, I can feel it grabbing some of that stuff. And it's just forcing it out of the way so it doesn't dry in the threads. If it dries in the threads, we're in trouble. So there we go. I'm finding that's not quite as perfect. So that's going to harden, and that's going to take a few minutes. This here, this can be my test. I can already tell this is getting really hard. So the longer you mix this, the more you're going to activate it, but you need to mix it to a certain point. And boy, this is like non-workable. So I don't want to mess with that bottom too much, because at this point I could wiggle play into this material and then the bolt head's not going to hold. So just once you get it set, like it's pretty much done. So I'm going to let that sit for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then I can come back and put the black shoe polish on it. We're on the home stretch here.